I'm an Agile and Lean coach and trainer and consultant, primary within the IT sector. However, recently, for the last maybe 3 years, also in non-tech industry. And I'm also authorized instructor for Agile HR and Agile leadership.
Well, thanks, Jo.
Super.
So what we're going to do is we're going to make you do a little bit of work straight away this morning. And we have a little questionnaire with a few different statements loaded of what does business agility look like. So if you all wanted, you can even do this on your phone. You don't need to do it on a laptop or anything like that. And good morning, Coco, as well. I see Coco's joined us. Is to go in here and just have a look at these different statements that we have. And see what your views are on them, whether you strongly agree or disagree to them.
Yep.
And feel free as we go through this. Like, obviously, we have like a small group of us, which is lovely. And you know, this can be a discussion based. Like, so please ask questions as we go through this. Like, and you know. I'm going to go on to this as well, Joanna.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I've got someone looking for me for the link for this. Let me just send this to him. Two seconds. Oh, Hugh, you found it. I was just about to go and find it for you.
Thanks, Gail. Sorry about that.
No, you're grand. And you know something? I think that's our first learning for this. Is like make it a little bit easier to actually get into it.
Have other people had a problem?
Yeah.
Joanna or Gail, if you can just put the link in the Zoom chat, it will be easier for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let me, Joanna, do you want to do that? Have you got this? Have you got the link for it handy there?
For Menti?
Yeah. I just don't have it loaded on my laptop.
Yeah. You see, I will have a link for a backend, isn't it?
Okay, so let me, do you want me to see if I can get it up here without losing?
Yeah, and we have another reply, yeah. Mm-hmm. Gail, did you fill yours yet?
No.
Okay, so we have 3, including me, so 1 more person, and then we're ready to go.
Cool, perfect. You have a private audience with us this morning, Hugh.
Okay.
Will I share my screen?
Yeah, perfect, yeah. Let me stop sharing here.
And you have to make me a host, please.
Can you share without a host?
No, I'm getting a message that I can't.
Let me just do that, Joanna.
Okay, so those are our results. So far, 3 people failed. So,
okay, interesting. So, okay, let's look at the first one here. So maybe let's maybe just go down through these in order. So by dividing our waterfall project into time-boxed iterations, we become agile. So most of you, I think, have disagreed with this, and that is correct. In the majority of cases, and I guess this is addressing like some of the myths around agile, because a lot of people think that just when you put in time boxes and you use sprints and you have your daily stand-ups, and people actually believe they're agile, but it's all about how you deliver within those sprints and actually breaking stuff down into iterations And the focus of those sprints needs to become on value rather than just a sequential execution, which you would have within a waterfall project, if that makes sense.
So in Agile organization, we do not manage our teams. So a majority of people disagree with the statement. And so in Agile organization, we empower the team to be self-managed, but still we do not micromanage, or we do not manage in the traditional sense, but we still give them some guidance, still give them some frames to operate with. And then they self-manage and self-organize within that space.
Mm-hmm.
So we do not have a chaos.
Mm-hmm. Yep. On the next one there, so a few people, did anybody answer strongly agree to this one?
So the third one is, do you want to read it, Gail? So
yeah, so we're agile. We diverted from our business plan and created a product in a vertical industry, in a different vertical industry. So this is a really interesting one. So, and actually one of the case studies we're going to look at is actually around exactly this. So when we start out with a plan, so I guess like the whole kind of idea and the concept around agile is not following a plan that you may have set out. So it's about adapting as we go. And you could argue that, by creating a new product in a totally different vertical industry could actually, be away from your business plan. But really, it depends on the reasons as to why you actually went and did that. And when we look at one of the case studies that it's like from Sleegleaf Distillers up in Donegal here, is that they actually went and created a brand new product that was, the instigator for that was when COVID came along, and they went and created a brand new product which was using hand sanitizer. And this was just showing that they actually, they really adapted to kind of what was going on in the world and changed. And they were looking at their organization to try and identify, right, well, how do we actually survive this whole new world,
We are a mature organization. We no longer need to adapt and change through retrospectives. So actually, this is the opposite. So I think nearly people, we are too much to the right, to my liking, because an agile organization, Kaizen, continuous learning and improvement, is absolutely a core of agile practices. So mature organization will build the culture of retrospect and reflect and improving continuously, not as an event, but on an ongoing basis. Mm-hmm. And very often an immature organization will do the opposite. So there will be a content, okay, we are doing well, we are okay now, we don't need it, which is actually the bad practice. The good practice is to make sure that you do it on an ongoing basis.
Mm. I think the whole kind of concept around inspect and adapt, of always trying to change, always trying to improve, always trying to figure out what you could do differently and do better, that's baked into that whole. And, for a mature organization, it's almost more of a reason that they should be looking at that. The next one there, our customers asked us for X, but we gave them Y. So does this mean that they are an agile organization or not? And I think this is actually kind of ties in with the second last one that we went through. So this is like really about, so you might engage in your customers. It's all about, agile is really about customer centricity and really learning to walk and actually walking, looking at kind of like customer empathy, like actually figuring out, well, what is it that your customers do? How do they operate? What challenges do they face on a daily basis? You're trying to really kind of walk in their shoes to really understand what it is that they do and what problems that they face. So even when they might come to you and ask for, to have like something developed or a product developed, but really if you're working in an agile way, they might ask you for X in the very beginning, but in the end, you might have given them Y, but it has become a collaborative process as you do that because you're doing it in iterations. You're actually engaging them, having conversations with them at the end of every short iteration. So as a result, they actually get a better product because they're actually engaged in the whole process. So by actually having that engagement and collaborating with your customer, you can end up developing a better product for them rather than actually, giving them what they wanted in the beginning and just delivering that, 9 months later or whatever. So it really is, working with your customers and being flexible rather than following that rigid plan.
Okay. Thank you. It's an agile project, so we don't need any documentation.
And everyone strongly agreed. My goodness.
So my personal view is documentation. Of course we do document, and we do need documentation, but only what's helpful. We do not document for sake of documenting. We just create something what will be used later. And we had a conversation with Gail yesterday about that. A very valid point Gail raised. Very often documentation is used instead of communication. So obviously that's a anti-pattern. Documentation, it's just a starter for conversation. So having handovers in front of, having handovers in form of documentation, it's a bad practice. But if you have a documentation which is useful, helpful, and it's just a starter for a conversation, that's a really good place to be.
Mm. So it's really, Joanna, you said it perfectly. It's really the ability. It's stepping away from using documentation as a means of communication to actually collaborate, discuss, and actually talk to the people that you need to, communicate with, and then use documentation as a means to capture kind of the outcomes of those conversations. And it's a very subtle shift as to what we use documentation. But there's a huge myth about Agile, like, oh, we don't do any documentation. We 100% do, but it's just about using it, I guess, in a more pragmatic way. The last one here, so we don't use Scrum or Agile or any Agile frameworks, but we're Agile. So really good, nice one. I think everyone is kind of in agreement with that. Well, most people anyway. So again, there is this over reliance, like the whole, Agile is very much, when myself and Joanna were chatting about this one last night, it's, Agile is very much branded as Scrum right now in this world, and Agile and Scrum are very, very different things. Agile is mapped really back to the whole original Agile manifesto, which kind of, it's more about the values and the culture of how you would engage with your colleagues and customers. Whereas the frameworks, this Agile framework of Scrum and, some of the bigger kind of scaling frameworks, they're really ways you would implement it. So Scrum has almost become the de facto name for Agile, because it's so widely adopted. And there are many, and this is what we're going to go through today, is like showing you how you can do Agile without even going near any of these frameworks. So just because you're doing Scrum does not mean that you're doing Agile. That makes sense? So let me share.
Give me a second, I have to make you a host.
Perfect. So what, is there any of those that kind of make sense or jump out at people or have questions on it?
All that you said makes sense. Yeah. It would be so much easier if everybody understood those things, right?
This is what we're here
exactly.
to. We're going to spread the word. We're going to spread the word.
That's it.
Any other comments, questions? Makes sense? Any part of that is unclear? Anything that surprised people?
Hi, Gail, Karan here.
Hey, Karan.
So regarding the point that, we are a mature organization, we no longer need to adapt and change through retrospectives.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of retrospective, implementing things in a digital world is way easier than implementing the same in a very physical first organization, because I've been part of both in my professional career. And even though during retrospectives, you do come to know there are many such, bottlenecks that are holding you back. But because of the time frame of the deliverables of the, things that you're supposed to deliver within physical elements, it is not possible many a times to include those feedbacks or suggestions seamlessly as compared to a digital world. So I wanted to know your opinion as to how can we take an agile, that is an entire ideology based that initiated from the digital world, transcending to the physical world. How can I include those retrospectives well? Because it is not as easy as it is in a software first world than a physical deliverable world. So how can we include or inculcate better feedback in that scenario?
So so if I understand your question, Karan, it's really about how do you incorporate feedback and improvements into your cycle when you're not working in a cyclical way like you would be in a Scrum world. Is that?
No, sorry, is it,
okay?
That's what you're asking, or are you asking actually for manufacturing? I didn't understand.
Perfect. So, yeah, because right now you're comparing a software first environment with a manufacturing, that's a non-digital environment. So how do you take a concept that is initially purely meant and bred and evolved over the digital world into the manufacturing world? Because improving, sorry, please go on, I'm listening.
So Karan, it's very interesting because when you look at Apple, so in 80s, Steve, the production was outsourced and it was in India, but regularly, I don't remember the cadence. I don't remember it was once a month or a quarter, but he requested a sample of the product which was shipped to America, and he was using office workers as the sample group. So people who were in the office, they have opinions, and he was using them for brainstorming what could be done better, what could be done differently. So and that's been done in the long time ago. So I think it's a cultural thing rather than anything else. If there's a culture, we want feedback, we do want to make this the best thing ever, that will be, the organization will find a way to get to get to that. Gail, do you want to add anything to that?
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I get the point.
Cool.
Thanks.
So, and actually there might even be learnings from this as well, from the two case studies that we're going to go through. So the first, can you guys see my screen again? Yeah.
Yes.
So the first case study that we're going to go through, and actually, funnily enough, like these guys are, I've migrated to Nicole during COVID, and these guys aren't that far away. And it was actually Joanna who suggested that we talk about these guys, and I had the pleasure of doing a little mini interview with James last week, and what they have done with their company. So they're a distiller. They manufacture, they distill and sell gin, vodka, and whiskey. And I would highly recommend their red. So their red whiskey. It's called Silky. It's absolutely gorgeous. But what they did when COVID came along was that they decided that they weren't going to stand and wait, until the new norm had actually created itself or had kind of settled. They wanted to actually adapt there and then. And they were looking around the community. So it's run, this organization, there's about maybe 14 of them in the organization. And Moira, it's run by a husband and wife, James and Moira Doherty. And Moira came from a nursing background. And immediately the first thing that they thought about was how horrendous, they saw COVID stick around for 2 to 4 years. And they saw how horrendous, hand sanitizer can be and how harsh it can be on your hands. So what they did was, the first thing, I suppose they did two things, was that they needed to kind of try and create a new channel for selling. So one of the first things they did was, within a 3-week period, they stood up, they reviewed all the different laws around whether you can sell alcohol online, because no other distiller had ever done it directly. They looked at the law for it. It was vague. It was, obviously there could be a challenge yet on it, but they basically, within the space of 3 weeks, launched a website and started selling and released some special edition whiskies online. And within 4 weeks, they had those sold out, because they had absolutely no competitors. Nobody had ever actually sold liquor online directly from their distillers in Ireland. And now all the other distillers are actually following, and they had just conversations with the other distillers, some of their competitors, and they were all like, oh, we don't know. And they just went ahead and they took that risk, and they did it, and they sold out. So this was one of their things. But one of the other things that they did when COVID came along was that they thought, right, well, what can we do for the community? So what they did was, and this I absolutely love, is that they went and created, and this goes back to the point that we were discussing from the questions that we went through, which is around, okay, so looking into a different vertical and actually creating a different product, because this was, how would they were, they're only kind of going since, I think maybe they're probably about 3 or 4 years, 5 years, maybe max in the running. And they're still trying to get their brand out there. So what they did was they created a hand sanitizer. Moira had experience of how, from being a nurse, as to how harsh hand sanitizer could be. So they worked with a local company, they got some seaweed extract, and they manufactured, they got a license from the government in a really short period of time to go and create hand sanitizer using their waste alcohol. And So it was something that they were throwing out. So they turned this around. So objectively looking at what they did within the within their organization, of how thinking outside that mindset, like outside that box that they were in. No, we're just a distillers and we just make liquor. It was like, right, how can we actually respond to kind of what's going on in the world and actually support the community? They distributed and gave, like, and still do give gallons and gallons of this away to some of, you know, like local businesses in Donegal. You see their hand sanitizer everywhere. And for them, it was still in line with getting their brand out there and supporting their community, because one of their organizations, you know, their whole kind of ethos as an organization is to really try and bring jobs back to local communities, but they still sat with their purpose as an organization. One of the things that really struck me about chatting to James was that one of the quotes he said, he goes, there's no time to get things perfect in a small organization. It was like, do something small, iterate, get something out there and try. And he says that's their entire business model, which I absolutely love. And it's not just the talk, like they actually do it. So I asked him, I was like, you know, like, you have such an amazing growth mindset. And, you know, I asked him, I was like, if you were talking to people, like, what would your advice be to them? And it was like, to be brave and be courageous and constantly ask yourself, what could you do differently and what you could do better? And from that, they have become a success story. They have built their brand massively. They've won awards for some of the whiskies that they released online during COVID. And I would highly recommend giving it a try. But yeah, it's really, really a fabulous company to understand the workings behind. So yeah.
Lovely.
That growth mindset and the agility in them, like, of actually thinking outside the box and never, you know, like, if they had followed their plan, you know, they responded to change that was going on in the world. They responded to change and they changed their plan, and it has been successful.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Gail. Do you want to change the slide?
Yeah.
Thank you. So it's very interesting, because what I love about the previous case study is they were like so dynamic. It was like boom, 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 done. You know, they took opportunity of the market. So this case study is more about a big ship, big organization, well established, one of the top 7 oil and gas companies in the world. You know, they called super majors, and they were proactive. They look at trends, they look at patterns, they analyze the data, and they know that world is shifting. So they were very proactive and innovative in their thinking, and decided, okay, we need to change direction. And they are actually pivoting completely their business model, and they are reimagining and reinventing themselves as an energy company. So it's very interesting, because they are completely changing the strategy in the recent years. And what I find it very, very interesting is they're extremely successful. There is no immediate need for them to do it now, but they've been very proactive in their thinking. So they know, you know, they're good, but they can be better. And there are different opportunities, and probably the current opportunities will dry at some stage. And they are proactively thinking about it and acting on it. And this is extremely difficult. It's similarly when you think about, for example, Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods changed his swing in the peak of his career. So he had a history of success. There was a record of success there, and then he completely pivoted and changed his style. Similarly with Muhammad Ali. He completely changed his style at some point, even though there was a record, that proven success story behind it, and how difficult it is when you are already doing well to think innovatively and do something differently and question the status quo. And similarly to the previous case, everything is very much purpose-driven with VP at the moment. So they have a purpose, which is all about making a planet, you know, looking after our planet, making lives better, lives of the people better, and driving that emission to net zero. So they have a very clear vision, and it's not about profits, it's about making planet a better place and lives a better place. So they can easily, they can very quickly see if the decisions they are making fits with their purpose or they are actually bad decisions. And they're also very collaborative, and they cooperate with some different research institutions. They partner with some organizations. They actually are looking to partner with 10 to 15 major cities worldwide with different industries, helping them to meet their targets on net zero emissions, but also learning. So this is like peer-to-peer experiences, learn opportunities. And also they are looking at sustainable pace. So everything what they're doing, it has a long-term view. So they have a purpose, they have goal, they know where they want to get, but then they divided it in more sustainable steps. So they have achievables for 2025, 2030, 2050. So they divided the action plan to smaller pieces, but still purpose drives them the right direction.
Yeah, thanks, Joanna. I think the contrast between the small, nimble company versus the actual bigger company and turning the oil tanker versus like our evergreen ship, it is always about inspecting, adapting, changing, developing that growth mindset, understanding, trying to actually step away from kind of like, get your head out of the soup and figure out how can we actually survive? What is it that we need to do as an organization to change and become more competitive, essentially? Thanks, Joanna. So any questions on either of those case studies? Any part of it that was really interesting? So just stepping back and looking at all of this in terms of adopting an agile, I guess, mindset, bringing agile practices and a way of thinking, bringing agile leadership into your organization. Essentially, some of the benefits that are there for the taking are really about becoming more effective and efficient, and having, I guess, what we mean by that is that you've got like a better use of time, in that you will potentially, by working with your customers in a different way, working in a collaborative way, you will essentially develop a better product as you do that as well. So it becomes a better use of time. There's a myth around there. It's like, oh, agile is faster. I don't think it is. It's actually, you just end up with a better product at the end. About getting up and running. So quite often people don't want to start a project until, or a new idea or a new product plan without doing all this detailed planning. That's what our default is, back to our waterfall sequential world. So what Agile allows you to do is actually start really early and start fast and fail fast as you go with that as well. So you can actually start with unknowns and iterate as you go. So the output of what you're iterating on becomes the input into the next iteration of what you're actually building, whether that's a product or a project that you're executing. Increase customer satisfaction around building a better product because you're actually working with your customers. And inside the organization, employee satisfaction and why people want to come to work. When they're empowered and, I guess, trusted, developing that kind of, the culture of trust and transparency within organizations. Developing this concept around psychological safety, where people feel safe to actually challenge and give ideas, that they're not going to be shot down. It's all about, you see some of these agile organizational kind of charts, and it's like there's leaders at every level. The leaders aren't at the top. The leaders are at every single level within the organization, and everybody within the organization is a leader. So it's always about trying to create that culture where people aren't afraid to be leaders in their own roles, no matter what, stage of their career development that they're at. And then, we looked at Sleeve League, like responding to change, like they responded to change and they have increased their competitive advantage. They actually got ahead. They have actually set like a new precedence, like for how distillers will engage with customers as well.
Thank you. So a few takeaways from this session. So when you look at where to start, where would be the best place? So you start with inspecting, and either you inspect what you've done so far, if you try something new, or you just look at data, some evidence. You try to be curious and open-minded. What what can we do differently? What are the trends? What are the patterns? Visualization is a great tool in doing that, because by visualization, we actually might see something. We can start seeing how the dots adds up and seeing some patterns, some trends, how, direction that things are taking, and making better decisions. So it's always good to visualize the data regarding processes, but in general, or different data that we are getting. And then once you see some pattern, you come up with some hypothesis, and you try to prove it by small steps. So you think big, you have a big goal, big plan, but then you start small. So you have to make a first step, and it's one step at a time. So you make that step, and you learn fast, and you pivot. You validate your learnings, and then you if it brings you closer to your destination, you go with it. If not, you pivot, and sometimes completely pivot and come up with completely different direction at that stage. And it's all about sustainability. So you develop a sustainable pace. If you are in the marathon, you don't run with the sprints, because you will burn out. There is different pace to it, and this is very important. And then you come up constantly with experiments. You come up with hypotheses, and then you validate. You think, what's the cheapest way for me to validate that idea? And for example, what we are talking about, Steve Jobs, for him, he didn't want to reveal the product, so he was using his own company as a forum for getting feedback on the product. But in general, it's like you think, what's the cheapest, the most efficient way of getting that hypothesis validated? And collaboration, a big one. So I think in the past there was lots about competition, but now I think there's more focus on collaboration. Who can we partner and complement our knowledge, so we can actually enhance those learning opportunities between many.
Yeah.
And then you adapt. And this is very important, because I really like this picture. This is like a BP case. They know their world is going different direction. For them to staying on the course, even though they are massive now, would bring them to rocks. So very important to be open-minded and look where are we heading? Is it the right direction? And then adapting when you have to. And if it's not a right decision, it's still okay. We can recover from it, because if you do one step at a time, there is the cost of recovering. It's not that high.
Yeah. No, I think all really valid points. And I could talk for an hour on each of these. But I think, like if we were to take, like, so Joanna has given a really good summary, and I guess like some tips in terms of like, right, if you were going back into your organization, like, and this is really focusing on the mindset of like what you would need, what do you need to bring back into your organization to start kind of leading a way of, introducing some of these concepts. What I want to do is just talk through a few of the tools, some of our favorite tools that we would use in terms of developing and trying to bring the agile mindset and the agile way of working into organizations. So design thinking is one of my favorite tools, which is really about, the first step of this. And if you Google any of these, you will get tons more information on it. Empathizing with the people. So you can even, you can even go and like talk to your teammates and understand, well, what challenges are they actually facing? And actually try and, there's loads of different templates for kind of questions that you can ask them during this step of it, to actually figure out, walk in their shoes. What is it that frustrates them? What is it that makes them happy? What is it that makes them sad within their role? What is it that like creates, that actually triggers emotion in them in terms of how they're, what they're doing within their role? Then you define what those problem statements are. Then you ideate, like come up with ideas around, right, how could you solve them? You now have an understanding of the impact of the issues, what the issues are, and then put together a prototype of some sort. So the value and the power of actually, even if it's like an idea for a product or, a slide that describes or visualizes something, the power, Joanna, you spoke about it earlier, like the power of visualizing a solution and actually showing something to somebody is far more powerful than actually describing it. Even the way myself and Joanna created these slides in a collaborative way, we actually just started creating something, and then it gave us something. It gives you a starting point to actually discuss, rather than just like describing, well, what is it that we want to talk about in this slide? So it just, by visualizing and sharing a common vision, you've got the same visual, you're both looking at the same thing, and it triggers the ideas in everyone's mind. So it's about putting something, building something, rather than talking about it or describing it or writing a document to describe it. Build it and show it, and then test it, and then go back again. So loop again. In the Scrum values, so you'll notice that we haven't actually included the process of sprints and time boxing. I think everyone is really familiar with that. What we really like about mostly around Scrum is really the values that it actually brings, and the courageousness of that, of like being brave and taking risks, and ask for forgiveness, not permission, in your organization. Step out of your comfort zone and try and like come up with ideas, put them forward, be brave in your decisions around how you're doing that, commit to them, focus on one thing. Don't try and focus on too many things. Like, narrow your band, limit your work in progress of what you're trying to do. The openness and the respect and the trust, I think, very much come together. The trust is generated by that respect and openness of being transparent. You're not trying to hide things. You're not trying to, get away from people or not kind of explain what you're doing. It's all about, by being open and honest about your approach and things, it really creates that trust with your partners that you collaborate with or work with all the time. And then in terms of tools, so my number one tool is a Kanban board. I'm surrounded in them. Well, I've got one big one beside me on the wall here. This is about getting your work on a board, or your team's work on a board, mapping out what your process is and putting your work in those columns, because the power and the learnings that you will have from just even observing how your work works is actually quite powerful. So the online collaboration tools that I've been using mostly would be the likes of, because obviously we're not in a world where we can kind of put a board on a wall and we can all stand around it every day. We'll be using the likes of Trello, Mural, and we can share these slides afterwards. So there's loads of different tools out there that you can use for these. And, some of those are free, some of them are paid, but.
Just the last add-on, if you don't mind me adding.
Yeah, please.
To me, the most important thing is like there is a common perception, knowledge is everything, but actually the modern approach to it is the knowledge without execution is nothing. So doing counts much more, because you're learning much more by doing than actually studying.
Yeah.
So so Menti, if you don't mind just sparing with us a few more seconds, we would like to get some feedback.
Yeah. And I guess this is like, so we would love to actually start developing these and kind of like, doing a few more of these sessions. We also have another one, which we'll put up in a second, which is around, well, what questions did we not get to answer today? What did you come along here expecting to learn? Is there certain areas that, if we were to do another one of these, what would that focus on? What would it not focus on? And we would love to get your feedback into that as well. So let me just...
Yeah, and Menti is open, if you don't mind. Okay. We have 2 answers, including 3 answers, yeah. Anybody else would like to give us feedback, please? Yeah. Lovely. Okay, so I will close. Okay, one more. Anybody still voting? We have six replies.
Excellent.
Okay, so I will move to the next one. I will close this one and move to the next one.
So so were there any questions that you would love to have known or to get an answer on, or were your expectations coming along to this different? What gaps are there in your knowledge? What is not? What's fuzzy in your mind right now around business agility?
We are just trying to get some ideas. If you want to organize more of those workshops, what would be useful for you?
So basically, we're using you to try and get information out of you as to what would be good for to do for these. No, we're not. We're obviously delighted to answer your questions. And obviously, if there's any questions now that we've got, actually just a minute over, are we?
Yes. Anyway, thank you very much for your time, and see you next time, I guess.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Joanna. Thanks, Gail.
Thanks,
Thank
Karan.
you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. I really enjoyed this. I am looking
Cool.
forward to more.
Oh, thanks very much,
joining
Koka.
us.
Thanks for supporting and coming.
Thanks for coming along at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Can I just say, when I saw the term business agility that I thought would be interesting to join, and I think it's great that we're talking about business agility and not any of those other things like scrums and methodologies and things like that, because this is the most important thing. It's about what value can you create and how can you adapt your organization.
100%, yeah. And I think, the way the IT world has led Agile, like there's so many parts of Agile in IT is so unagile in my mind. It's, all these frameworks and methodologies, and yes, they give somebody a template to get started, but really it's about changing the mindset and how you think and how you approach stuff, so. Yeah.
If I was going to summarize Agile in one word, I would say, business agility is about challenging status quo. To me, that's one thing.
Yeah. James actually gave me, when I was chatting to James on Friday, I was so lucky to have a cool conversation with him on Friday. He said, and he's just he doesn't even realize he's an Agile organization. That's what I loved about it. And actually his wife, Moira, she was going to join us this morning, but she didn't obviously make it. But one of the things he wrote down, let me check exactly what he said to me. He said, he's like, frame a question that only you can answer. And his question for their organization was, how do you capture Donegal post in a beverage? Like, it was just the powerfulness and like the connection that you can make with that as any human being. I think it's all about trying to bring like more human factors into how we operate, rather than, that to me is what Agile is about. So, yeah. Cool.
Look forward to the next one.
Thanks a million, guys. Thank you so much for your
great start for the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
For coming along. Cheers. Thanks a million, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Do you want to stop? Do you want to stop recording?
Yes.